welcome to the channel. I'm Tiffany and I am happy to bring you another cosplay tutorial, and this one actually I'm really excited for because it's a very requested character that y'all wanted me to cosplay for a while, and that is Dark Magician Girl from YuGiOh. And specifically I'm going to be going over how to make her staff. Yee! But before we begin, remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel to stay up to date with all of my latest tutorials. Now, let's begin. And here's everything that you will need for making this staff, and I'll have links to everything in the description, as well as you can find my 3D CAD file for this staff available on my website, tiffanyGordonCosplay.com. And for those that are interested in how I made this CAD file, basically I worked off of a reference image of Dark Magician Girl's staff, and then I brought it to life in a 3D modeling program called Rhino 6. And from that point, I basically made each shapes, and then I segmented it into 4 pieces so that way it was ready to print. And for me, FlashForge sent me one of their FDM printers to try out, so I was going to be using that one for this project. So I ended up putting my file into Orca Slicer, so that way I could put all of my supports and my infill into the pieces, and printed it on FlashForge's AD5X FDM printer using their provided PLA filament. And once everything was printed, I then removed all of the tree supports, as well as I did a little bit of cleanup using some sanding buffs with a Dremel, as well as I ended up gluing the 2 center rods together using epoxy, but I did not glue the end ball or the spiral swirly top part. I was going to do that later on, so I'll go over that later in the video. But this print ended up having a lot of stair stepping, so it had a lot of cleanup that I had to do. And for all 3D printed parts, I like to go and use Rust-Oleum 2-in-1 sandable primer. And basically I apply a even coat onto all the pieces, wait for it to dry, and then I'll grab some 220 grit sandpaper and I will sand all of the parts. Side note, I recommend doing wet sanding as it's going to be a lot less dusty. But because it had so many stair-stepping issues around the curvature of the swirl, I ended up doing 4 coats of this to get it roughly more smooth. And this process took a bit of time, but once I was relatively happy with it, it was on to painting. And like always, all of my airbrush paint is provided by Craytex Colors, as well as my airbrush equipment is provided by Iwata Airbrush. So that's what we're gonna use. And for all 3D printed parts, when it comes to painting, I like to use Autoborn Sealer as a base coat, and I'm using the color silver. Reason is, by using this as a primer onto all plastic surfaces, it's going to make it so all paint going afterwards is going to adhere to the surface of these smooth objects and cause your paint not to drip, and it will actually stick. And then for our real colors, and I'll note for a little helpful tip, most of these parts have a male piece sticking out of them, so I ended up using some masking tape and then using some hangers to clip onto it, and that makes it a lot easier to paint all of these pieces in 360, and that way they will be able to hang and dry. And focusing just on the ball and the spiral piece, I ended up using metallic copper as our first coat, waiting for it to fully dry. And then I moved on to the next coat, which was going to be a mixture of pearl gold and gold chrome. This is going to make it so when the light hits it, it's going to kind of do this reflective surface, and you'll see the copper coming through underneath, but you'll still see the gold, like the nice gold on top. It's really pretty in person. Then put those pieces to the side, and we're gonna grab that rod. And again, I use the masking tape on the male connection part and a hanger, so that way I could paint this piece. But I'm gonna be starting off with our blue color, which is going to be a mixture of Wicked Cream, Daylight Blue, And from the Bloodline color, we're gonna be using Expired Blue. And this gave me pretty much the perfect color to match the blue color of fabric trying to go for. I then waited for the paint to dry and masked off all of the blue parts using masking tape and paper towels. And a little helpful tip is with your masking tape, put it on either a piece of clothing or on your leg before putting it onto the surface of your 3D printed part. This is gonna make it so the tape is a tiny bit less sticky and it won't leave adhesive or peel your paint off once we're done. And for our pink color that we're gonna be using, I did a mixture of Wicked White as well as from the Bloodline paint line, I'm using Infections Pink. And for this specific color that I was mixing, it was to match the color of fabric that I was using for the rest of the cosplay. And I'll say I hit these colors pretty spot on. Then once that paint coat was dry, I removed the masking tape and it was time for our last coat, and that is going to be our sealer. And I like to use Cretex Colors UVLS Clear Satin. And this is going to leave an even clear coat onto all of the pieces and make sure our paint does not fade. It'll protect all of our paint from sunlight and just give an even consistency throughout the piece. And all that's left to do now is assemble this staff. And for this, I'm gonna be using 2-part epoxy. So mixing our epoxies together so it's the right consistency, and then putting it into our parts and connecting the ball on one end. And then I ended up standing it up so that way it would sit perfectly. And once that had cured, then I used epoxy again to put in the other side. And after waiting for everything to dry, after 24 hours, the staff was finished. And that, guys, is how I made Dark Magician Girl's staff from the anime YuGiOh. And I hope that this video you found helpful for helping to recreate your very own one. And if so, let me know in the comments, as well as what character should I cosplay next. And as always, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel to stay up to date with all of my cosplay tutorials. And a big thank you to all of my sponsors here on YouTube, as well as all of my members, specifically those legendary members who help to support me so I can continue doing this as my full-time job and bringing you more cosplay tutorials to help you make your own creations. And I'll see you for our next one, which actually will be Dark Magician Girl's hat. So stay tuned.